Welcome to the Software People Stories. I'm Shiv.
I'm Chitra.
And I'm Gayatri.
We bring you interesting, untold stories of people
associated with the creation
or consumption of software-based solutions.
You'll hear stories of what worked
and sometimes what didn't.
You will also hear very personal experiences
and insights that would trigger your thoughts
and inspire you to do even greater things.
Before we jump into today's conversation, a special thanks to PM Power Consulting for encouraging and supporting this show right from the start. With over 1,000 person-years of collective experience, PM Power has helped many organizations, teams, and individuals chart out their own journeys of excellence and make progress. Thank you, PM Power.
In continuation of our International Women's Day celebration, we are in conversation with Bindhu Unny, who's a social entrepreneur, leadership coach, and a master facilitator. She talks about how she started her journey in Wipro through campus placement and how she kind of realized the power of software through several aha moments. She later transitioned to product and business roles just due to the curiosity around requirements gathering. She covers her philosophy of progress over perfection and gotten into a cycle of learning, unlearning, and experimentation. Bindhu pivots again towards coaching through certification, and she also does podcasting through her podcast called Unmasked, where she focuses on genuine conversations and self-discovery. She covers her conversation around social entrepreneurship, about community-driven library, empowering youth with financial and leadership skills. And she covers how much her life's responsibilities has nurtured her passion and vice versa. You can hear her excitement in life as well as in everything she does in this conversation. Listen on.
Hi, Bindhu. Thank you for coming to Software People Stories. Appreciate you coming.
Thank you for having me.
I know you now for 30 years? 3 decades odd. I'm so glad that we are doing this after such a long time.
Correct. And who would have thought, right, when we met so many years ago that you would be doing this?
Absolutely. And Bindhu, in your own words, can you introduce yourself for our audience?
Okay. So it's a very big question, but I will try and summarize as much as possible. So where introduce myself, I will start with how you and I met. So that's where I guess those are the beginnings. An engineer from REC Trichy, NIT Trichy, whatever you want to call it. And from there on, I call myself, yes, an engineer, then I call myself a software programmer, then I call myself, I went through different avatars, so I will just kind of name those because they're all just labels. Then product design, professional services, sales, and then moved into customer service, and then segment marketing, and then took a complete switch into doing leadership coaching, facilitation, a podcast host. Apart from that, I'm a mom. I love dancing, performance arts, and a whole lot of interests there. And I also am a social entrepreneur at the moment. So that's my transition and my current. That's the most summary version that I can give you.
Oh, so exciting. So I want to start talking about every part of it. I'm afraid it's going to be very, very interesting. And for the audiences who are hearing during the March celebration month, it's going to be extremely rich in content. So happy to have you, Bindhu. So you were a software engineer, programmer, and the natural shift I can imagine into program design, product design, and stuff. How were your initial years like? You were with Wipro when you passed out of college, right?
Correct. So I went into Wipro through campus placement.
Okay.
And I think that was one of the most richest experiences I've ever had in terms of just initial the first job, understanding work, understanding life. So I think that was the first initial foray into that. So it was extremely rich in terms of the company, the team, the whole experience right there. So that's where I think I learned what life is. That was the initial bit. And in terms of the work, that was my first foray into actual coding. At that point of time, it was more software, and you're like, oh, that's the big thing to get into. So that's how I got into it, just stumbled into it. And I really enjoyed the whole learning. Through that came travel, that came a whole lot of things. But in terms of the coding as such, I really enjoyed the whole logical part of it, like how you needed to think through stuff and problem solving. So those were a couple of bits that I really learned on the job, and also realized how it honed my own skill. So those were bits that were the initial bits of my life at Wipro.
If I can ask one question before Wipro, what was your early, software? Were we able to do this in software kind of a realization? Any early memories of that at all? When you said about logic, I've used this logic and this now makes sense.
I can only remember things in our octagon back in college, where that was like a wow moment, where that a computer, a server, they can do stuff fast, and do it much faster than, I guess at that time I thought it was even faster than the human brain. But I think that was my first aha moments back there in college itself, where software then began, when we began to learn those software programming languages, and those were the bits where I was like, oh, there's a completely different world out there.
Yeah.
So that was my first foray into what software even could do.
So can you imagine the travel that software has done along with what we have done, Bindhu? So when you decided to switch towards the design world, product design world, was it very natural, organic within an organization, or how did that really, pan out when you took the next step?
Yeah, so that journey was the fact that initially, though I was doing work, I kept finding, what is it that drives me? What is it that I want to do? And one thing that struck me very clearly was that I didn't want to only stay behind a computer doing stuff that I was told to do. So in terms of, there was the requirements given to me, and I had to fulfill that requirement. And very quickly, I realized that I wanted to do what was being given to me. And that's when I said, okay, what was it? And that was obviously from design, and the requirements came from that, the requirements documents, right? So I was like, I want to do that. I want to write that. And that's when I started asking myself, what really drives me? And that question kind of kept making me explore different things, taking risks. So while that time, what was designed was really unknown, I began to want to go there. And that's when I started looking for opportunities that could give me that door. And that was just the question of, I want to do that, and I want to be at the requirement stage, and I want to, that was something that drove me. And I also realized that when somebody gave me the requirement, I kind of thought through it and said, oh, this can be done better. This can be done differently. And sometimes it was taken. Many times it wasn't, because it was just the way the team that I was in and the role that I was playing, nothing wrong. But I realized that that's where I could give my value add. And that's when I started exploring, how can I make that transition? And then I started moving and doing different things. And I did my MBA in that whole walk towards trying to do that, which I wanted to do. I kind of did that in between.
So tell me more about your MBA. I understand
talking about requirements analysis, gathering, somewhat of a business analyst role at that point in time. Not to some extent, it is there now, not necessarily. Now you're expected to play multiple roles. But when you decided this, you did your MBA in Dubai, right? What
Yes.
propelled you towards Dubai? I know lots of colleges are there in India as well as in multiple. What propelled you to take it up in Dubai?
So work and life just brought me back here because I used to live here as well. And I wanted to make sure that I was doing my studies and working as well because I needed to fund it. So that was just something that was very practical, absolutely practical. And I said, okay, how can I do it? I wanted to learn, and this was my way to make sure I learn and work and fund it. And keep moving in multiple directions. So that was just a very practical, down-to-earth reason why I did it that way. And on hindsight, when you look back and connect the dots, I guess things just happen for a reason. So now it all makes sense, but back then it was just very, very practical choices.
Nice. So when you were in your after your MBA in American Institute of Dubai, you moved to which company? Which companies did you decide to move?
Yeah, over the many transitions that I made, one big transition that I think I would really attribute a lot of my growth to is I started working in a startup, back then a telecom startup here in the UAE called Do. So I was very, very fortunate to be part of that startup team before the launch. And that meant at that point to do everything. Just like an entrepreneur in a small company, you need to do everything. You need to learn to do the photocopy and coordination, to think strategically, how do you get the first customer, the sales. You needed to really think through that apart from the whole brand, the whole strategy. So that kind of really gave me a complete view of how a company runs, except that this was a big startup. It wasn't a small one. That was a big jump in my expansion of thinking completely, giving me a foray into every bit of what is possible in a company. And there is when I began to realize, I really enjoy certain things more than the others. Some things come more naturally to me, and some things are more intentional, and I need to work through it because it needs to be done in a particular way. So though that journey really, that startup, that expanded view, and I guess I was just fortunate in those formative years to get that, where I spent a big chunk of my professional career. So that really helped. And I think that gave me an idea like, I really enjoy the world of product design, product marketing, segment marketing. That's my that really drives me every day. So that's what kind of gave me that big expansion.
When you work in a startup, right, I'm very curious as to, did you have mentors to help you through the various organizations that you're working in? Segment marketing, I see customer acquisitions, I see lots of. So how did you skill yourself in those areas? I'm sure some of these skills will be very useful as a social entrepreneur for you. But I'm very curious as to how did you skill yourself? I know you have done an MBA. I know you've done a BTech in a very renowned institute, but still there will always be a fear, right, in terms of mistakes or in terms of not knowing or getting started right at the beginning. How did that more from a skill set as well as from a mindset change happen?
So very good question. So in terms of skill sets, yes, a lot of things had to be learned on the job. There were a lot of people who were obviously better than me, mentors. Not they were not really called mentors, but as in I guess this is for everybody. You kind of look up to certain people in your job, in your social circle. So that's how I kind of anchored myself in terms of certain people. But in terms of the question of upskilling yourself, I think that's something that all of us need to be ready for at any point in time. So to kind of look at what is out there. So for me to transition, I definitely needed to look at how to present. For example, in a marketing role, there's a lot of presentations. How do you design a new product? What does a customer want? How do you ask the customer? Market research. So these were all completely new areas for me. And to be okay with this jumping in, and I think one of my early, those managers that I worked with, the fear of like not having the fear of failure. Like, okay, you'll fail, so what? So having that kind of a mindset, which was a tough one, but to have that mindset of it's okay, you can fail, but the important thing is to fail fast and then to make changes and improve and then try again. So I think that was one of the early things that I had to, and it was not easy. I was like, oh, coming from a very perfectionist mindset, saying that, oh, whatever I do needs to be perfect. I realized that that was actually stopping me in terms of mindset rather than helping me propel me forward. And then now I keep saying it's progress and not perfection. So keep making progress, take that one step at a time and not wait for that perfect presentation and then that perfect moment and the perfect product. It's that perfection is never there. It's only in our head. So to get off that was definitely something that I had to work on myself. To let go of that. And I keep completely holding that even now, saying make progress, not perfection. It's okay. So that is another thing that I hold on to definitely. Helped at that point of time in terms of mindset and learning how to learn. Keeping on, like constantly learning on the job. Doesn't matter that, oh, I have to skill myself outside and then I need to come. No, just kind of try. Keep learning how to learn and unlearn as well. So unlearn, learn, and then relearn. So keep doing that cycle over and over again because things change, people change, customers change, products need to be redesigned. So you can't really settle with the old glories. You need to kind of say, oh, okay, fine, that worked at that point of time. Now what do I need to try? Do something new. And it's not about just it worked one time and it'll work all the time is not necessarily true as well. So to have that kind of what I call is like it's like an open mindset. It's like the child's mindset, right? You just kind of say, okay, fine, it's okay. An experimental kind of stage. To keep that mindset was something that I also learned, and then I keep that right now as well in even what I do right now. It's like, let's try, let's experiment, and worst what can happen, we'll fail.
We are in the same place where we started, right?
Yes.
I agree. And we also call this as a beginner's mindset. And
absolutely,
to have that beginner's mindset, and that's why a lot of people say, hey, it's great innovation when it comes right with fresh people out of college. It's not like, innovation can't happen at any stage in life. It's just a matter of readiness to fail and okay to get up, right? Any interesting stories that incidents, anything that you want to share when you were in this stage before you moved into the social entrepreneur? I know after this big 10-year, you were in do for about 10 years, right? And after this is when you started moving into the more of a social entrepreneurship kind of a roles, right?
Correct.
Any incidents of that happened that made you say, yes, I'm ready for taking my next jump in my career? Any incidents that you remember that propelled you towards this?
Yeah, a couple of things that come to my mind is that, again, during that whole journey, while I enjoyed doing what I did, the question of what drives me was always, I think I kept holding that question to me. Like, what do I need to do next? I kept asking that question. And over that, though I loved what I was doing practically, I also realized I really enjoyed working with people. And that was something in terms of mentoring them, coaching them without really realizing what to call it. That was something I really enjoyed doing. And then that drove me to find out what is it again. So then that drove me into finding out the whole coaching, something called coaching exists in this world. So then I upskilled myself there as well. in terms of I did a certification, I did the courses and the certification and the practice there, because that was something again completely new. And I really enjoyed that journey. So while I was toying with both, then I said, okay, now, and also my daughter was born at that time, so I needed the flexibility as well. So multiple things came at that point of time. So then it was about, let's try this one. Let's try something new here. And that's when I jumped into that particular area of what I am doing right now.
Excellent, Bindu. You are now in the way of very similar. I often say my role is to ensure that teams, organizations, and people become high performing. And your mantra also is very similar, empowering individuals to follow their passion and unleash their full potential. So, without disclosing their names, of course, any incidents that you can share with our audience during your journey of using coaching as a tool to help organizations, individuals?
Absolutely. So my whole motto of the fact that we as individuals are, we all have passion. We're all human at the end of the day. Yes, there is a part of us that comes to work. There's a part of us that fulfills a role in our family. So there are all of these parts of it. But then I think at the core, we are a person. And that sometimes gets lost in this whole, in life. We kind of forget who we are. So when I coach people, when that is something that I really anchor on, and I noticed over the journey that many people, and me included at one point in time, forget who we are, what really drives us as a person. Like, what's my passion? What do I really enjoy doing? Is a question that often we don't ask. We don't have the time to ask because we're busy fighting fires, dealing urgent tasks and things like that. So I've noticed that when that gets switched on, many incidents where people kind of take off from there, it's just that spark. Seeing that different spark in people's eyes when you touch that core. It's like a switch on button. And then you see that glimmer of hope, that spark in the eyes. And then from there on, the stuff that people end up doing is really nice. It sounds small, but then when you start seeing that, I realize that over the years, that's what drives people. And the other thing that I've realized as a pattern is that a lot of these conditionings come in our childhood. It starts there. I mean, it just starts there. Your friends, where you're born, the people, the culture, it all just kind of seeps in our subconscious and we don't realize. And bringing awareness there helps us understand, oh, these things help me and the other things don't. And having that self-awareness and then saying, okay, now what do I need to do with it? Like, you need to unlearn those conditioning that does not serve you anymore. It might have served us as youngsters and teenagers and things like that, but then realizing that no longer serves you. Like, for example, one of the things is risk-taking. Many of us are risk-averse. It's just out of how we are told, like, you grow up, you study well, you get into a college, you do a job, and then after that, everything will be set. Like that's your mantra for success. And it's just there in our heads. We don't realize it. But then as we kind of dig in, we realize maybe that worked back then and it's great. Nothing wrong with it. But is it serving us right now? Is that next step that we need to take something that we need to kind of uncondition ourselves in terms of risk taking? Like what I jumped into doing what I'm doing. So it was a big risk. It was easier to go into a job and have that running constantly. But does that drive me? I don't know. So the question of asking that question. So I've realized that it's important for each individual. And when I touch that and then I see those people just fly, it's great. It's just nice.
Excellent. And you also come with your own personal story, right? You say how you have learned, how you have grown over the years.
Right.
that sort of, I'm sure, is helping you in terms of facilitation
Yeah.
as well as leadership. So talking about leadership coach and facilitation, I know we were both part of a panel recently, and very clearly you have a flair of facilitation, talking to large set of individuals and able to be a public speaker, right? So how can you talk a little bit about that? Do you do group facilitation now, and as part of your role, and how do you help others also to learn such a skill?
So for me, in terms of my personal journey, I've loved doing performance arts in general. So I love dancing, did theater, even in college, if you remember, I was constantly in all the culturals that was there. So this just came. Then I didn't identify it as a strength back then, but I realized that was something I would enjoy. The whole stage, the whole setting, and the preparation and the high. So that whole performance cycle. That I think naturally I would bring in wherever I was in terms of whether it was training small teams, training a person, and over again, it's a pattern that you realize, you kind of connect the dots from the back and say, oh, okay, fine, that is something that ran fairly constant through my life. And so that's when then I said, okay, maybe there is something there. And I would then explore opportunities wherever facilitation would happen, or speaking opportunities and things like that. And I really enjoy it. And that's I think the big thing, that do you enjoy it? So that answer for me was yes. So that is something that I kept going. And then I do run communication workshops out of understanding what works up on the stage. It's a very different different part of you that needs to get switched on there. So what is it that can be done? So a lot of this comes naturally to people, but I also believe that these can be intentionally worked on. If it doesn't come naturally, and there's nothing that cannot be learned, and this is also a skill that can be. So I do work, and I love working with children, young adults and children, where now I kind of bring in that, because again, like I said, a lot of these things come from childhood. So if you catch them young, you can mold them there. So then I do run a lot of communication workshops, both for corporates, but then also for young adults. And then with my podcasting journey, there was another thing that I jumped into, because I enjoy talking to people and I love conversations. I love authentic conversations, and a part of me that but this applies to everyone again. When you have a really authentic, genuine conversation, some part of it it's left in your heart. It's there, and it is something that you will remember. It touches your heart. You take an action. There's something. It's a warm feeling. It's not. You can't even put it in words. And it's there that I said, oh, if I feel that way. And in contrast, when you have just a superficial conversation, you feel it. You're like, you have it, and then you move on. It does not really land, whatever. It's polite, and you move on in life, and you make 95 to 99% of many of our lives is in that arena. But that 1%, when you have that conversation, it touches your heart, right? And so that's when I was like, oh, I enjoy doing this as well. And then I started looking at what are the medium where this can be used, like where, and if I have that feeling and I get that warm feeling, in what way can I give more people that feeling? So if my need is there, which means there's at least one more person in the world who has the same need. So I just started there, honestly. And in that journey, again, it's about, I had to learn. Going back to your earlier question about learning, it's like, okay, this sounds good. It looks easy, but then I wondered, how does one do it? And the whole podcasting journey has been a huge learning curve for me, thinking that it was a very easy thing. I started off thinking, how difficult can it be? And then I was so badly mistaken there. I was like, oops, there's a lot to learn there. And the conversation is just one bit of it. So yeah, so that was the whole one big jump learning curve that I had there. But the whole point I did it was because I felt that the world needs more genuine conversations. It really came from that place. And that's what I ended up doing. And then when people generally, when I have people guests, they'll say, oh, I don't know what to talk. And then I'm not good at speaking and all of that. And I realized that's where many of us are. And you start having a conversation, people just go on and on and on. And they're like, oh, did I really talk all that? I mean, it was so normal. So it's really nice to see that transition, right? And especially the people who tell me, oh, I don't think I have anything to say, and I'm really bad at this, are the ones who I have the most beautiful conversations with.
Perfect.
So,
For
yeah.
those listeners, Bindhu runs a podcast called Unmasked. She's a host of Unmasked. So I hope you will go and watch out her Unmasked podcast. And
Yeah.
Bindhu also has run a podcast for our alumni network, REC alumni network also, and she does a fabulous job in podcasting. So Bindhu, tell me a little bit about when you are ready to learn. Has there been some areas where you say, I learned this, I am not too keen, I am ready to move on? Kind of, has there been such incidents also?
Yeah, I'm sure there have been where
Okay.
I've just dropped things and moved on. I'm just trying to think. I know that I do try things and I realize this does not come to me naturally. And this is difficult. This is a struggle. I stay with a lot of things, thinking that it's easy to just give up. But what I definitely do is I do take it on and I stay with it. I stay with the struggle because I think that's where a lot of us just drop off, thinking that it's boring, it's difficult, it's time consuming, I can't do this, I'm old, all of these conditioning. So I definitely stay with the problem and the struggle. And if still it does not work for me, then I drop it.
Yeah. Market
But
conditions, external conditions, all of that also matters sometimes. But I get it. So you are now a social entrepreneur. You come a full circle, starting from a corporate, working in a startup, working for yourself for example, running a podcast and being a facilitator. What does it mean to you being a social entrepreneur, and what made you propel here?
What keeps me here or what propels me here is to make a positive difference in the world. That's my big thing. We all are going to come and go, but the impact we leave, I think, is what is going to stay on. And saying that, I ask myself, okay, what can I do? It sounds really big and it sounds like, oh, wow, like solving the big world problems, but what can I do as a person? And that's when I started looking at it. Again, I look at my own needs, where my need comes from. There's probably one more person who has that need. And then I realized, oh, there are many who have that need. So my need at one point was in terms of learning. Again, this whole learning, unlearning, relearning cycle. A lot of us adults face this. The conditioning of unlearning is huge. It's very, very tough. So that's when I began to look a little more into the way we learn, the way our conditioning is, the way our structure is, the learning systems, curriculum. So that's where I kind of just went into just finding out for myself. And that creating impact, where you start small, you start when people are young, is when that caught me. And one of the things that I run right now is called Leela Loka, where Leela is play and Loka is universe. So the universe of play is what we're working on in terms of like in our culture, play has been a very normal thing. You learn through play. It's so many Leelas happen, Ras Leela, Ram Leela, Krishna. It's all about play. And I think that's something that as adults we forget. Then play becomes a very kiddish thing to do. But that is naturally, as humans, what we enjoy. And then the side effect of playing is learning. And it's like, when you have fun, you don't even know you're learning, but you are. But right now, the way we learn is that you keep the learning right on top. And these are all the one, two, three things that you have to learn. And then maybe we will include fun somewhere. But if you just turn the whole thing and see, and this is for young and old, It's really cool to see how things change and that impact, because when you're then enjoying yourself, and like for example, I ran a corporate workshop on board games. We normally corporates are, you need to be serious, straight jacketed. Things have to be in a particular way. But if you break that pattern, and then I ran a couple of now workshops on board games. Like pick a couple of board games and get people to play. And when that happens, you realize in a simple thing, I'm calling it simple, but it's not. When you play a board game, your personality comes through.
Yeah.
You begin to learn who you are. You begin to learn how you work with your competition. You begin to learn, can you collaborate as a team and work against the board? There are so many things that happen just through something as a board game. And when you just turn the tables and then pick up debrief and learnings from there, it's like fabulous. So it's about taking that risk and completely turning tables, right? So again, it's about creating impact. So you leave that difference, you kind of shake up the pattern, and immediately the person or the team of people or the community, there's a different way of thinking, and you're like, oh, there's also a different way. I don't need to sit on a chair, look at a presentation or whatever, and then learn. That doesn't have to work like that. So it is my experiment in trying to break those patterns and seeing what can emerge out of it, is what keeps one part of me working the way I do. So that's the social entrepreneur. And then in communities, so as our kids grow, there's a lot of, now if you see a lot of our generation, we say, oh, the screens are causing a lot of problem. They are not connecting with people. They don't know how to talk. Yes, I understand. This is like saying when we were young, when the TV came, it was like, oh my God, TV is going to spoil the generation. We're going to get specs. It's going to cause eyesight issues. There was a lot back then. And now we're like this small screen and then AI. So life, we're going to evolve. So how can we kind of pick that up? Like today, we don't even think about TV. Every house has one or maybe multiple TVs. Nobody says, no, you cannot watch TV. But I remember being told that, right? Oh, TV is really bad for your eyes. So coming back to, so now how can we kind of, yes, there is a problem. There is a clear issue with the generation that's growing, but then how can we also work with that and see how can they connect? Look, how can that human to human connection happen? So in our community, we run small projects where the younger kids come up with ideas, and for example, we have a community library that runs. The idea came up saying that, we don't want to keep buying books, and I don't want to read books on a screen. So I said, what is the option? So then they came up with ideas and said, okay, fine, why don't we start a library in our community? Because I don't want to go to a library at a distance. So there were some problems that came up with all these were all 10 to 14 year olds. I said, why don't you start one? They said, no, it's not possible. I don't have the money. There were a list of issues that came up. And then we said, okay, now what's possible from there? So in that conversation, at the end of it, we said, why don't we collect books from our community? Maybe people want to donate books.
So do you do such experiments and programs on a regular basis, Bindhu?
Yes, totally. I run these kind of things on a regular basis. Basically, it comes from the people I speak to. If there's a problem, there is also a solution. And when that mindset comes in, then you kind of keep looking for problems are there everywhere. It's very easy to get everybody to talk about it. And then looking at that, then turning the conversation on. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of conversation. It's a lot of discussion. But then we need to get through that whole curve of, yes, let's exhaust all the reasons why something will not work. And then we start beginning to see the light, saying that maybe these things can work. So having those conversations and then doing these as smaller projects, I think helps me also see that there is a ray of hope. And when I see the younger generation also see that, yes, I can convert something from nothing to something that's in front of me, like this particular library, when now it's actually a running library, they run it, they are the ones who, I only provide the logistical space, I do nothing. But to see them pick it up and then they have made the money from, they run it, they make the money, they run the accounts. So it is like huge to see that they now know how to run the accounts, what's the money coming in, what is the account balance, how many books are there, how many books, these are like, it is, and I'm talking to strangers. So they talk to strangers, the marketing needs to be done. So it's again running a business end to end. So to see that and then see confidence being built even for the next generation, I think that's huge. So I'm just playing a small part and saying that let's create impact here and then see where else this can go. I believe it's a ripple effect.
Very, very cool, Bindu. I almost feel like you're a catalyst for the change, and that's the best way in which you can work in. That way, as a catalyst, you can keep moving on. You can start the change, make it happen, move on, and it's so impressive, Bindu. And also, one is to say these are the constraints that are there in the system. Others to think about the constraints and say how do you work around them and how do you work with them. So both ways, right? I think that's when interesting solutions happen and life itself becomes very interesting.
Yeah.
So happy to have this conversation, Bindu, with you. And there are any words of advice for women during the International Women's Day?
I don't think I'm here to give advice, but one thing that I would just say a couple of things, I think for all of us as women, when we're again conditioned to be naturally, we're very caring and we keep ourselves last. One request to everybody out there, and this is maybe specifically for women because we tend to not do it, is to kind of keep that passion alive. Find out what drives you, find out what really is important for you at the core and keep that running. Yes, life happens, but keep that passion running, because somewhere if you keep airing that particular spark, it will help you balance the rest of your life. So keep that always running through whatever you do.
So thank you so much, Bindu. I could hear the passion. I could hear your genuineness that came through, and loved your journey of being a programmer, being a project, running projects, running, a part of being a successful startup, as well as running so many social entrepreneurship initiatives. I feel like, there are more podcasts that are going to come from here, and I wish you all the very best for your new endeavors, and looking forward to more conversations with you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. This has been so amazing. After being on the other side where I was asking you questions just a month back, it's lovely to turn tables and do this. It's really, really nice to see this. So I'm really hoping that this podcast that you're having, I know it's been 6 years now, and I'm really hoping that this will just continue to inspire more people to do more things.
Definitely. Thank you so much, and have a fantastic day ahead. Bye-bye.
You too.
We thank Siddharth for the music and Anita for promoting the Software People Stories.
If you like this episode,
Please subscribe on your favorite podcast client.
And spread the word in your network.
if you'd like to share your story,
Contact us at podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.